Alright, so these right here are a new variety of beans I'm growing this year. These are called Tongue of Fire, and they're a bush bean, and they're a smaller bush bean, so you can grow a bunch of them in a pot like this as long as you keep up on watering them and keeping them fed and stuff. But they make beans that start off green, then start getting red streaks, and as they mature and get older, they turn pale, so that when they're mature, they're like a pale off-white with brilliant reddish fuchsia streaks. And then you use those as dried beans, as soup beans. So I've never grown beans for dried beans, but this year I'm going to give it a try. I'm going to let these go until they get to be dry beans. So that's something new for my garden this year. Okay, so these are my main planting of beans, like green beans. These are Italian green beans. The variety is called Roma 2, and I have 8 buckets of them, and I planted 5 seeds in each bucket. There's a few I had to replant because they didn't come up. You can see this one, the replanting is just starting to come up, and right down there, and then right over here. So with any luck, I'll have 40 plants, and they produce a fair amount of beans. They're not a super high producing type of bean, but you can't get them in the stores, and you can't even get them at farmers markets. The only way you can get the broad flat Italian green beans here is to get them canned or frozen, and sometimes I want to use fresh ones. So I grow them. That's one thing I have to grow myself. So these are the Roma 2 bush beans, and they're coming up pretty good. So these are my bell peppers, and I've got 6 varieties of bell peppers and 2 varieties of just Italian sweet peppers. So for bell peppers, I've got a white bell, I've got a lilac beauty, I've got an orange king, I've got a California Wonder, which ripens from green to red. I've got a chocolate bell, and then I've also got a California Wonder Gold, I think, that ripens to yellow. And then on the end, I have 2 Italian peppers. I have a red Marconi, which make really big, long, green to red peppers. And then behind it, I have something called a Gatherer's Gold Italian pepper, which makes the long, kind of thinner peppers, and it ripens to a golden, kind of yellowish orange. Okay, so these are my squash plants. Well, the summer squash plants. I've got 4 zucchini plants and 4 yellow squash plants. And the zucchini plants are a variety called Astia, Astia, and they're a smaller variety that do better in containers. And they're pretty prolific. They did well for me last year. So I've got 4 of those, and then I've got 4 yellow squash that are just your basic early straight neck yellow squash. And I have them with these stakes because I grow them vertical. So as they grow, I take the stem and gently tie it to the stake and guide them up the stake. That way I don't have them sprawling out as much, and it's easier to grow them in a container. And another function that the stakes do is they hold up a little tent, a mesh tent that I cover these with to keep squash vine borers from getting into the vines, laying their eggs and destroying the vines. So they can't get in through the mesh to lay their eggs. And I just lift it up. Rain gets through it, sun gets through it, you can water through it, but I just lift it up like every day or two when they're blooming to hand pollinate. And some little bitty crawling bugs are able to get up under it, so they pollinate as well. So it's not a problem to pollinate. It's probably not feasible if you have a really big row garden to do something like that, but with 8 squash plants, I can handle that just fine. So that's how I'm going to do it. All right, so these are the big tomato plants, And I started them early, and as you can see, they're already pretty big and they're already putting out blooms. I have two each of four kind of just unusual varieties. I have two that are kryptonite, which ripen to a brilliant kind of streaky green. I've got two that are called black canary, I think, that are kind of a bright yellow with brown tops, brownish purple tops. And I have two that are called dark galaxy, which ripen to a dark, almost burgundy with bright whitish yellow specks on them that kind of look like stars in the sky. And then I have two called black strawberry, which are supposed to be a deep reddish burgundy with just bright streaks of yellow and orange and red and a little bit of green even. So, and purple. So we'll see how those come out. They're supposed to be very colorful. I've never grown any of these four varieties, so we'll see how they come out, if I get many tomatoes off of them, and I'll let you guys know how they work. Alright, and these are just some chives that I've let go to bloom because the bees really love them, and I'm going to be repotting those in the not too distant future into some bigger pots, maybe separating them and dividing them to make more chive plants. And that's where I put my stevia plant for now. So that's just some little chives and then some empty pots I'm going to be planting stuff in. Okay, these four guys are a variety of cherry tomato called chocolate cherry tomato. And if you've ever bought little plastic boxes of kind of brown cherry tomatoes in the supermarket that are really sweet and flavorful, it's probably these. So I'm going to be they're in their pots. I'm going to be transporting them to another part of the garden probably next week. These are vining tomatoes. They don't really bush out. They make long, thin vines. So I'm going to be putting these next to a trellis and letting them, grow taller and train them up the trellis so that they'll grow that way. And I've grown these once before and they did pretty good for me. So I'm hoping I get a good yield out of them this year, but we'll see. I'll give you updates on those as they go. Okay, these three in the front in these green pots are called mammoth jalapeno. And they're jalapeno plants that make extra large jalapenos. They're supposed to get up to like 5 inches long. I'm specifically growing these to make stuffed jalapenos, jalapeno poppers, once they finally make jalapenos. So that is their entire purpose for existing. And then behind them on this trellis, those are some cucumber vines that make shorter vines. So they're called Space Master 80, and the vines only grow to about 3 feet long. So I've grew those last year and they were really good. So I put in some of them this year, and I grew them the same way, 2 plants per bucket, and they were really prolific. So I put some of those in again. So hopefully those will be just as tried and true. And let me show you some other stuff. Okay, these are called Beit Alpha, B-E-I-T Alpha cucumber vines. And the rack behind them is also Beit Alpha cucumber vines. And eventually you can see I've got these 2 racks. I'm going to put a piece of cattle panel across the top to make like an arch so that cucumbers can grow down between them. These are a long vining variety. If you've ever bought in a supermarket what they call baby cucumbers or mini cucumbers, they come in a bag. I found out that they're almost certainly this variety. These are also called Persian cucumbers, and they're supposed to be very, very tasty, and they're supposed to be really easy to grow in our climate, our hot, humid climate. They're supposed to grow well for us and be a little bit resistant to mildew. So I really like to have cucumber salads and cucumbers on sandwiches and things like that. So I like to grow a lot of cucumbers. So I planted my first round of these seeds a couple of weeks ago, and they didn't really sprout all that great. So I planted another round today. So with any luck, I'll have 16 plants and a lot of cucumbers. And this little thing here in this square, that is called an Annie's hyssop. It's an herb, and the flowers are supposed to attract pollinators. And that little green pot over there, that is a Thai chili pepper. So my one Thai chili pepper for the season, because we use them, we just don't use enough to have more than one plant. And they tend to make a lot of peppers, so that's good. So I'll move on and show you something else. Okay, so these 4 pots, those are tomatillos, and they're purple tomatillos, which we can't get them in stores, and I've never even seen them in a farmer's market. I've heard that they have a sweeter, fruity kind of a flavor, different than a normal green tomatillo, and that they're very good to make salsa out of, especially fruit salsa. I thought the idea of purple tomatillo and pineapple salsa would be great, so I decided to go ahead and plant some of the seeds, because I got some of the seeds and they came up really good for me. So I put the 4 best. I had 5 plants sprout, 1 was a runt, so I kept the 4 good ones and planted those. With tomatillos in general, you want to plant more than one. If you plant 1 tomatillo, you're going to get a few fruit. If you plant 2 tomatillos, you're going to get more fruit. If you plant 3 or 4 or more tomatillos, you're going to have a lot of fruit, a whole bunch of fruit, because they can't really pollinate themselves very well. They have to have another of their kind to help pollinate, kind of like blueberries. So I planted these 4, and they're doing really good. They've already got some blooms on them, so we'll see how they do. And then behind them in those black fabric pots, nothing sprouted yet, those are going to be okra. I found a variety of shorter okra. It is dwarf long green pod okra, and the plants only grow about between 3 to 4 feet tall. Some okra can get like 10 to 12 feet tall, but I needed something that would be a little more manageable for containers and easier to work with if I need to work on them from a seated position. And the plants only grow about 3 to 4 feet tall at the most. But the okra are long okra, so it's called long pod, and they stay a little bit more tender as they get a little longer. So good yields, more manageable plant, more container friendly. So I'm hoping these come up good. And that's about it for now, I think. All right, so these 5 plants, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, are a micro dwarf variety of tomato called Orange Hat. And as you can see, there are already baby tomatoes. First baby tomatoes of the season. And yeah, they're doing pretty awesome. Awesome little plants. These have some kind of damage on them. That was from transplant shock, because when I first brought them out, I had hardened them off, but then we had a minor freeze. So my tomato plants had a little bit of freeze damage, but the top growth is all good and healthy, and that's what really matters. So these make little orange, little bitty tomatoes, like penny gumball sized tomatoes. I think they have a great flavor. I think they have a neat flavor. Some people don't think they're great. The skin is a little tough, but I think they have a great tomato flavor. So I like to grow these because you get a lot of, they're early ripening for one, and you get a lot of little tomatoes off of each. So yeah, those are my first tomatoes of the season, and I couldn't be happier with those. Okay, so these are some snow peas, and I planted them right at the end of the season for them in our area. We're in a warm zone. We're in 8, right on the edge of 8A, 8B. So I just say zone 8. So we're in zone 8, and snow peas, your last chance to plant them is in mid-February, and I planted these on Valentine's Day. So as you can see, they're already starting to bloom, and they're gripping okay on their little stakes. I'm going to have to help twine around some stakes. I just wanted to see how they would grow and if I would get any snow peas out of them. I'll plant more next winter, now that I know they'll grow, and I just put them in a little bit more shaded area up against the house so that they wouldn't get just blazing hot sun, because we already have days where it's getting up into like around 90 in the afternoon. So I had to put these in an area where they were protected from the elements. So yeah, they're already blooming. Got myself some pretty little pea blossoms, and there are 20 vines. So if I get enough snow peas off of these 20 vines to make one stir fry, I'll be happy. And then next year I'm going to plant a whole bunch of them when the weather gets cold, because they really like cold weather, and we can pretty much grow them from December, December through April here. And you can plant them at the end of November, beginning of December, and you can plant them up until mid-February, and they'll grow. So hopefully these turn out good for me. I will definitely show you if these turn out. And they're just your basic snow pea. I can't remember the variety offhand, but it was just the snow pea you buy at the Home Improvement Center garden department. Okay, so I don't know what's going to happen with these. I just thought I'd show you. This is an experiment. I've never had any success growing winter squash. I've never had any success growing pumpkins, butternut, acorn, things like that. I got some seeds for a variety called honey nut squash, which are butternut squash that are miniature squashes about the size and shape of a pear, kind of. So imagine a butternut squash, but is only about 5 inches long. And that's what these are supposed to make. So I planted them in these, and I'm going to try to grow them up this little trellis. We shall see. It's an experiment. I've got some more seeds left in the pack, so I'm going to, if I can, within the next couple of weeks, while I still have a window of opportunity to plant them, I might try to make a sturdier trellis in some bigger containers. I got 2 seeds in each of these 2 containers. So I might find some bigger containers and make a sturdier trellis and try to plant 4 more vines and see how they do. Because, like I said, I've never had any luck growing winter squash, but I wanted to experiment with it this year and see if these did any better for me. On the right, I have some cilantro. On the left, I have some dill, Ducat dill, like a bushier dill. These things are looking pretty awesome. I thought I would show you how they're doing, so I'm pretty happy with these 2 containers. Alright, so these 4 things that look like dying grass, they're actually supposed to look like that. It's just that's this stage of their life cycle. These are saffron crocus plants, and at this stage in the saffron crocus life cycle, they go dormant. So they are grown from bulbs. You buy the little bulbs in the fall, and you plant them in your pots in the fall, give them some water, give them a lot of sun, and they start sending up little shoots that look like grass or chives. They look a lot like chives. And then they'll immediately after that start sending out flowers, which are the pretty, pretty little purple, pale purple crocus flowers. And saffron crocus flowers have those bright, bright red, orangish red little strings in the middle. And those are your actual saffron spice. And you get 3 threads of saffron per flower. And each bulb puts out like 1 flower. And to start with. So I had 25 bulbs. They all sprouted. I got a teaspoon of saffron this year. Really, I just grew them to see if I could, and because the flowers are so pretty, it was just a garden experiment. So they produce their flowers, then they keep putting out green that looks like grass or chives for the rest of fall into winter and into early spring. And then when the weather starts to warm up in late spring and getting into summer, they die off. And they turn brown, dry up, the leaves blow away in the wild. If you're growing them in pots, by the time they're all brown and dry, you clip them off at the dirt level. And then you just put your pots aside and keep them somewhere dry, somewhere that animals aren't going to get into them. Maybe give them a tiniest bit of water every once in a while, and you just store them. They're dormant. And the next fall comes, you take them, put them in the sun, give them some water, and they're going to sprout again. Over time, they will propagate under the dirt, so the bulbs will propagate, and you'll get new bulbs. And you can dig them up and separate them and replant the new bulbs, and that's how you propagate your saffron. So probably by the end of the month, these are going to be fully brown, and the one pot second from the right doesn't match because I only found three of those flat pots, those bulb pots, at once, but I finally found a fourth one, so I'm going to dig those up and transplant them. So I'll have all four matching pots. And then next fall, I'll put them out in the sun, give them some water, and see if I get some more saffron. So I will keep you guys up on that.